Understanding the Potential of IT3, or FR1004, is one of the mandate units in the Digital Applications at SCQF Level 6 framework. If I go over the unit outline, this unit is designed to allow IT users to develop their understanding of the impact of IT on business, society and individual. It has a particular emphasis on exploring the potential of new and emerging technologies. So this unit is a knowledge-based unit. There is no performance criteria within this. It entirely comprises of knowledge. It's particularly about getting learners to understand why technology is better, why it's more efficient, what does technology offer to businesses, to individuals, to organisations, and what are some of the issues that are relevant around the use of technology, and exploring these ideas in the context of your work and your working environment. There is 4 learning outcomes for this unit. The first is understand how IT is transforming business and industry. So that's understanding the changes to business and industry that technology is having upon them. The second is then understanding the impact of the internet and mobile communications on society and individual. The difference between those two there is mostly that the first outcome is specific to business and industry, the second outcome is specific to society and individual. Third outcome is understand how IT is used in an organisation, so that's more of the practical application. The first one's more about the potential, more generically for business and industry. Outcome 3 is how is that applied in an organisation, and then outcome 4, understand the effect of introducing new IT tools and systems into an organisation. So what is some of the thought process that should be taking place to introduce new IT tools and systems and to make best use of their features. This unit is at SCQF level 6 and there's 8 credit values, which means this is quite a large unit. It should take approximately 80 learning hours to complete. That includes the time it takes to learn to understand the knowledge, to apply it in the workplace and to conduct and take part in the assessments. So let's start with the first outcome and look at the first point. So transforming data management and business processes. IT, computers, drastically change business processes. Many of these business processes would be significantly more time consuming and inaccurate if they were done using analog methods. If you think what it would have been like 30, 40 years ago, before computers were cheap and freely available, all the business processes that you do would have to have been done using a paper-based system, essentially. A system where it is a physical paper document. There is really only one of them unless you make copies, but if you update the original, the others don't get updated. You just have to shred them all and recopy them. They don't have to be filed in a filing cabinet. To find records, you'd have to have index cards, and you'd have to sort them all alphabetically or with codes. You'd have to have index cards to find out where the codes are, and for doing cross-referencing, you couldn't simply perform a search function. So these are examples of how a computer has changed and transformed business processes, and it could help to think about the most common business processes which you perform in your role and think, what would that be like if computers weren't available? How would we, or how would the organisation, or how would I perform these tasks if I couldn't use a computer? Think about how complicated it would be to keep track of all this information. A business process is a structured set of steps that you follow the same way each time you need to complete a task. So this is just to get you to understand what a business process is and how IT and how computers affect your business processes. So think about a business process such as invoicing. So every time an invoice is processed in your business, it's done by completing the same steps in the same order. That makes it a business process. So essentially anything that you do that's a task, but you've been shown it's the same steps you need to do, it's done in a standardised way, and you just repeat that same process over and over again. That is what we call a business process. And this question is really looking to get you to understand how IT can help people deal with data. So for example, files, financial information, other details, contact details, addresses, customer account numbers. How can computers help deal with all that information? How can IT help people to do tasks that businesses need to be able to function? And when you're looking at this question, you want to try and have it sort of at the same time when you're putting this question in, this knowledge, you want to be able to have it in the context of your workplace. So how do you use IT to deal with data to do your work daily? So think about how you complete a business process, and think about how completing that process on a computer is more effective than doing it without one. So we think about invoicing. If invoicing was entirely paper based, it would require the invoice to be posted out. It would require you to get the mail. It'd be delayed rather than email. An email takes seconds. Postage is more expensive, and it takes a number of days to get to you. You'd have to open it up, and you'd have to get a book, and you'd have to find the right page in the right book, and you'd have to get a pen and write in the date, the amount, the VAT details, description of what the invoice is for. You'd have to total up at the bottom of each page the totals, the running totals for your accounts. When you change to the next page, you have to write the top, balance carried over from the previous page, and then any other invoices, any other financial information you're putting into that paper-based ledger, you'd have to physically get a pen, write it all down. If something was to happen to that one book, all that information would be lost. It's not going to be backed up. You're not going to have extra copies of it. You've just got that book. So if there's a fire, if there's a flood, if it's lost, if it's stolen, if it's been put in a bag and you've left your bag in the train, that information is gone. Whereas on a computer it would be backed up. It's also a lot slower, and it's incredibly slow to look up the information. Say you had a reason you had to look up one particular invoice. It would take you a very, very long time to find the exact location within a stack of books to find that particular record, and it's also going to be less accurate. There's always human error with these things, particularly when it comes to adding up the invoice amounts, totaling at the bottom of the page and carrying over to the next page. A small error on that will have a massive impact when it comes to the end of the ledger, and that can build up over time, so that information is going to be less accurate. So for a business process which you complete, have a think about what it'd be like to complete that task without the use of a computer or without the use of computer software. So computers do change, they do transform, and they improve significantly a number of business processes. So let's look at some advantages. So you get better customer service. Customers are happier because you can find information quicker. You can identify problems before they occur. You can find information that's relevant to your customer quicker. It saves time printing, it saves time on data processing, and it increases the accuracy of the data that you're putting in there. Copying and pasting information that's in a PDF onto your accounting software is a lot quicker than finding the right book, getting to the right page, getting an invoice that's been posted to you. It takes a lot longer to do that, and it's more accurate, like we already mentioned. You can have automated sorting and filtering of data. So if you're looking for particular information, it's a lot easier to sort it. So think about an Excel spreadsheet. You can select on the headers, click sort. You can sort alphabetically, or you could sort by numerical value, so highest to lowest or lowest to highest. You could also filter, and that would remove any of the rows which you wouldn't be interested in looking at, so you can find information that's relevant. And you could also select Control F and find, just type in a keyword and it will highlight all the areas that keyword is on the document, on the spreadsheet. So these tools can drastically increase the time it takes to find information, to look it up. You also have automated routines and scheduling when you use computer applications. There's a lot of processes which are automated so that you no longer have to do yourself. The computer does it for you. It's an automated process. If we stick with the finance example, think about bank reconciliations. A lot of accountancy software can link to your business bank account, and instead of manually having to reconcile invoices and records on your accountancy software with actual bank transfers, the software can automatically access your bank data and reconcile it for you without a lot of human input. Human input is really just checking that it's been done properly and looking at any exceptions, anything the computer couldn't sort out. So there's a lot of processes automated as well. Things such as when you create a new account, our customers automatically sent an email to welcome them in. Automated routines that would send out communications at certain times. These are examples of computer automating admin tasks to make it quicker and easier. And I'm sure there'll be a few examples you can think of from your workplace. There's also consistency, so there's greater consistency with templates, processing, and the management of data. So with templates, you're consistent. You've got the same heading, same font, same color. For each form or document, it's easy to send out to a large group of employees so that they can then use that with their processes or their customers that they're using that template with. The way that data is processed can all be standardized as well. The location where it's saved on the computer, so it can easily be looked up. And the management of data, so that's to do with where data and information and files are saved on the computer. Is it on a shared drive where everyone can access? Or is it a shared drive that only certain people can access? Is it secure? Is it backed up? So that's all automated and it's all consistent. There's the efficiency and effectiveness of processes, so it's quite simply, it speeds them up, it's more efficient, and it takes less people to perform the same task with a computer because of these advanced tools, because you're not dealing with paper that can be lost and inaccurate, and it takes longer to get to you. Helps with change management. You can easily manipulate the use of data, so if you've got a spreadsheet, you created it for a particular purpose, you might be looking to find out something else, you realise the data's all on the spreadsheet, I can very quickly change that information, I can very quickly change the template, and that information is still useful for me. So if we think about, if you make a template for tracking sales perhaps, and it turns out that you are asked to complete that template in a standardized form, you're very easy to copy and paste columns about. It's very easy to add in data from somewhere else and just paste it in. Whereas if that was a paper-based table, you'd have to completely start again and write it all up. You can easily change, put formulas in to do calculations. You can easily change bar graphs to pie charts quite quickly, so you can change the way that information looks on a computer very quickly compared to doing it using more manual processes. You can also increase output and streamline processes. Think about scheduling perhaps. This could be an example where the process has been streamlined. Rather than having to use a phone to contact people to work out if they're all free, you can very quickly send a diary invite and people can respond as to whether they're available or not, and you can also keep track of who's accepting, who's declined the invite. Within an organisation, you can also share your calendar, and potentially that saves a lot of back and forth to people not being available. You can see their calendars, you can work out a time where everyone's free and you can send an invite for that time. That is streamlined that process. That could take a few minutes to create an invite with 200 people. If you were to create an invite with 200 people, phoning them up, asking when everyone's free and then going back to them with a suitable time, that would take far longer. There's also a cost saving. Using computers is cheaper. Computer equipment is expensive. The price has fallen dramatically over the past 10 years, but that is nothing towards the cost of keeping that amount of data that is required in the 21st century running a business in filing cabinets. The space that takes up, that requires a lot of rent to take up the space. Space is expensive, whereas you could have a massive warehouse of files kept on a device the size of a phone or a USB drive or on a computer hard drive, and that's a lot of space, a lot of rent that's saved because it's on a computer. So there are massive cost savings, although computer equipment themselves might be quite expensive. When you compare it to not using a computer, it's actually a lot cheaper most of the time. And also the cost in labour and people's wages. Do you imagine how slow these business processes would be if you have to do it paper based? Then the cost savings in having to pay people to complete that process manually is a lot less than the computer equipment and also the software licenses you need to run. You've got resource savings, so you can do more with less resources, less equipment, and you've got quality and quantity improvements. You can produce more and you can produce at higher standards, it's more accurate. You've got job satisfaction. People are a lot happier when they're using a computer to complete tasks. So let's have a think about environmental issues now around using IT equipment. So there should be some considerations in the workplace towards IT issues, and typically people's minds will first go to things such as double-sided printing to save paper. You'd want to email instead of printing. You'd maybe use a PowerPoint slide instead of printing. So instead of printing a notice board, maybe you'd have a TV with going through a PowerPoint slide, or you'd maybe just email it out to people if you don't want the TV on all the time. You could put your computer to sleep while you're away for long periods of time, so it saves energy. So these are all things you can do to to take into consideration environmental issues when you use equipment, to save energy, to save equipment, to reduce energy conservation, to reduce the use of energy. Video calls is a great one. This is a good example of how IT can help improve the environment because it saves travel, and when you travel, that consumes energy and generates pollution. So if you're not having to go in your car and drive an hour to go to a meeting, you can do a video call. That's going to save a lot of pollution, which is better for the environment. Same with remote sessions or screen share. You don't have to physically be there. Maybe you could have done the meeting if it was just verbal. You could have done it over the phone. But if you had documents, you'd have to physically go to that meeting, travel there. Now with remote session or screen share, we can share your screen. The documents can be sent over, and you can share your screen so that person can see. So that would reduce the need to go out and do these meetings face to face. Also reduces waste using a computer because you're not having to make multiple copies. Everything's not paper based, it's on the computer itself, so you don't have to use as much paper. And you've got recycling, so when you do print, you can recycle the printing that you've done once it's been used, so that it can then be reused, returned into paper, clean paper that can be printed again. And you can also refurbish used equipment. So whenever equipment has come to the end of its life cycle, its useful life cycle, it can be recycled, the components can be broken apart, and it can go on to further uses in the manufacturing process. So those are some good examples of how the use of IT can help improve the environment, and I think that's where everyone's minds go to straight away. But it's also worth thinking about, what if computers are the problem? What if they cause environmental issues themselves? So in previous decades, rapid advances in technology has resulted in many of these machines becoming obsolete quite quickly. So this is planned obsolescence. This is when obsolescence is planned into the design of certain IT equipment. So there's a few examples of this, but we can think about the changing of ports on a computer or on a phone. So if a phone company has a charger port, and then they decide to change the charger port, that then requires any bit of equipment such as a charging dock, speakers, any device that might be plugged into the phone through that port. They'd have to upgrade them. They'd have to get rid of the old ones because the port doesn't fit, or they'd have to buy an adapter. So that's an example of planned obsolescence. The headphone jack as well, changing the headphone jack on phones, that's an example of planned obsolescence, because it would require, if you got the new phone with a different jack, you'd have to either buy an adapter or replace your headphones. That makes those headphones obsolete. And the other side of it is software. So a lot of times software can be slowed down, and that would get people to think about, oh, it's getting old, this device, I better go and get the newest, quickest one, because it's frustrating because it's slow. And so that's sort of looking at Apple devices and things that Apple have done in the past. If we look at Samsung, when it comes to software updates, because that's on the Android system, it's only supported for about 2 or 3 years. Depends on the Android, phone manufacturers, but generally speaking, 2 or 3 years after the phone's been produced is when those organisations stop supporting software updates. And when that happens, for business purposes, you've got to have these security updates regularly to keep the information on these devices secure. The cost of losing information is far greater than the cost of replacing the device with a new device. So if they don't support them with security updates beyond 2 years, then organisations will have to go and buy the newest device. And that's an example of planned obsolescence, where the software hasn't been kept up to date, and there's actually nothing wrong with the hardware itself. It's more the software, and that's planned obsolescence. Non-removable batteries. So before, if the battery was a component, typically a component that wears out over time, batteries store less charge, and if you can't remove them, then typically the effort to go and replace them can make it be worse than actually having to buy a new device. It could be much cheaper, better to just buy the new device. And no security updates after 3 years, mentioned that. Financial contracts incentivizing replacement upon renewal. So financing options for IT equipment, and then when the period for that financing is up, there is incentives to replace a device, so you're constantly on a financial contract to pay it up. And unlike paper, which is sustainable and biodegradable, computers are made of plastic, and plastic is a byproduct of fossil fuels, which there's a finite supply of. So that means finite means it can run out. It's not infinite, it's finite. It can run out. It's also very damaging to the environment when fossil fuels are refined into plastics. Plastics don't biodegrade. If you leave something plastic in the ground in 500 years, that plastic item's still going to be there, whereas the paper would have degraded, it would have rotted away, and it's gone, whereas the plastic's still going to be there. Also, electric circuitry within a computer is made from rare earth minerals, which can only be found in China, South America, Africa, and there's concerns about working conditions and who's profiting from these operations. So, this is just to illustrate that there are issues around the use of IT. There are issues with the rise of technology and equipment and what we can do around recycling them. It's not as quite as straightforward as quite simply saving paper and double-sided printing. There's other concerns that should be taken seriously. I think that the biggest one that we've covered there is what to do with a computer once its life cycle is ended. And we find with technology, because of such advances in the amount of processing power that computers can do, the amount of memory that they can have, that after a few years they are essentially obsolete due to the advances in technology. The last point there is computers use electricity, and electricity in the UK largely comes from coal or gas. So we've got 45%, there's a statistic, of electricity comes from coal or gas electricity stations, power plants. So what's the solution? So there's things we can do. There's a move towards renewables. The UK energy supply is increasingly becoming powered by renewable energy. As you can see there, from 2011 to 2018, there's been a massive increase where now a third of electricity comes from renewables, and that will continue on. So the electricity issue doesn't become a problem. And the other major concern is about what to do with equipment once it's done. You've got the Waste, Electrical and Electronic Equipment Directive. So this is a EU directive which sets collection, recycling and recovery targets for all types of electrical goods, and it restricts European manufacturers as to the material content of new electronic equipment placed on the market. It also sets out different types of categories of electrical equipment, and it creates responsibilities on the manufacturers to have plans or process in place to recycle that equipment after its use. So it makes the manufacturer still responsible for the recycling that product once it's been sold, so it can be sent back to them. That's why a lot of time with printer cartridges, you'll see that the manufacturers, you can return the used cartridge in the box. Usually the postage is paid for by the manufacturer that supplied you with the new cartridge, and that's in an effort to recycle so that it's not wasted. 10 categories are there, so you get large household appliances, small household appliances, IT, telecommunications, consumer equipment, light and electrical and electronic goods, toys, leisure and sporting equipment, medical devices, monitoring and control instruments, and automatic dispensers. So there's a lot of different categories that's covered by that, and you can have a look, you can do a bit of research into this if you want to include it as part of your evidence, but the gist of it is that there is regulations about manufacturers being responsible for their equipment after it's been sold at the end of its life cycle. So let's move on now to looking at digital and collaborative technologies. So this is now looking more at the software and the changes that has on businesses and on individuals. So what is a digital and collaborative technology? So digital technology is any software that can be used on a computer essentially. And collaborative technologies is a very specific type of software that can be used. You've probably heard of a lot of this before, but a definition I'd give is that a collaborative technology is any technology, any computer application, any bit of software which you can use to work with someone as if you're in the same office as them, but they might be somewhere else. They could be working from home, they could be in a different office, they could be at the other side of the world. But using the software, using any bit of software that allows you to work with them as if they were in the room with you, that would be a collaborative technology. It allows people to collaborate, it allows people to work together. So let's look at some popular examples of software which would be considered collaborative. Microsoft Teams is the first one there. Microsoft Teams is what Microsoft has developed Skype into, and they've expanded its functionality beyond video calls and screen share into allowing people to share files, allowing them to save them in the same place, allowing them to comment and work on the files at the same place, and it integrates with a number of different applications such as SharePoint and Azure, and there's also a lot of third-party apps that can be included as part of this. So there's a lot of it's a one-stop place where you can find all of your productivity tools, all of your calendars. You can work as part of a team. You can have sub-channels. You can make posts, and you can find all of your files on there because it syncs with SharePoint. You've got OneDrive. OneDrive is another Microsoft technology which allows you to save files on the cloud. Cloud is essentially a server which is owned by another company, and they basically rent out the space on that server to you. And usually it's a lot cheaper because you only buy what you need. You don't need to buy all the server equipment. You just buy the space that you need, and you don't need to worry about having it all up to date and any security issues because the supplier, so in this case Microsoft, deals with all that for you. And it's mostly OneDrive is used for personal stuff. So if you have a Hotmail or an Outlook account, you'll get a free certain amount, so many gigabytes of storage on there, which you can store your files, and it allows you to access those files anywhere. So that's a benefit than just saving it on your desktop. If you save it on OneDrive, you could go into your phone, you could log into another computer, and you get access to those files, and they're secure because you've got your login. We've got Gmail, so that's Google, and it's just an email system. You've also got Google Calendar as well. We've also got Google Drive, which is about to come up, which is the same as OneDrive. Trello is similar to Microsoft Teams. Dropbox, same as OneDrive. Cisco Jabber, which is an instant messaging tool for businesses who have Cisco phones or telecommunication systems. Got Facebook Messenger, which is an instant message tool. Slack, similar to Trello and Teams. Google Drive, similar to OneDrive and to Dropbox. It's a facility for storing files, saving files on the cloud. You've got WhatsApp for Business as well. So these are examples of different tools. Have a think about the tools which you use in the workplace, and think about how those tools would impact your role, how it makes your business processes more efficient, and how it increases working together. So what is the impact of these collaborative technologies on business? Well, let's have a look at some implications and benefits. So you've got flexible working, and it can overcome communication barriers. So that's two things. So flexible working, that means you can work from home. That means you can use this technology to work from different locations. You could do it on the move because you've got a smartphone. You can set up your 4G hotspot, and you can connect to the internet on your laptop, and you can use this technology to work with other people as you're on the go. You don't actually have to be in a building to connect and to work with other people. You're not tied down. You can also overcome communication barriers because rather than just having a phone call, you can have a video call. And if you're explaining something complicated, you want to share your screen and show them a file or a graph or some sort of diagram, then you can do that as well. Also allows you to work on complex tasks across different locations. You could have a call with people in 5 different locations, different countries around the world, discussing and trying to come up with a solution to a complex task, and you could have it on any of these technologies, which allows a video call. You can share the screen, you can get up a digital whiteboard, and you can start penning out ideas and doing a brainstorming session. Before, that was very difficult to do. One person had to get a pen and paper and jot everyone's ideas down. Now you can use this technology to work together. Extreme weather, it means the need to work from home. So the idea behind that is if there's really bad weather, really bad snow, then it's not safe to travel into the workplace. So extreme weather such as snow or floods or anything like that, then you have to work from home. But that doesn't necessarily mean the organisation needs to miss out on a day's worth of productivity, because you can issue your staff with laptops, they can connect to the VPN, the virtual private network, from home, they can get access to all their work systems, and they can use the collaborative technologies to work together. You don't have to have a meeting in a meeting room. You can have a Teams meeting, or you can have a Skype call or a Zoom call, whatever technology you're using. There's a cost benefit, so using this technology is incredibly cheap. It's a lot cheaper than travelling to a location. The organisation having to pay for mileage, having to pay car allowances, train tickets, airfares, that sort of thing, and you can communicate instantly worldwide. So, I mean, even if you think about how much it costs to use your landline to call abroad, that doesn't exist anymore. If you're on one of these technologies, it really doesn't cost a lot to have a call with someone abroad, and you can do it as a video call and you can share your files at the same time. Mobile devices mean that you can access applications on the move, so you're not geographically stuck into the one location or even into a building. You could be doing it anywhere, you could be on site and you can access all the files that you require. It's secure, So your communication is encrypted, the files are encrypted, and it's all backed up. So if you're saving a file on OneDrive, on SharePoint, on Teams, on Google Drive, Dropbox, whatever it is you're using, it's secure because that information on there is encrypted. You need a password to access it. Sometimes we've got two-factor authentication, which is where, like if you've got any social media accounts and you have to put your password in and it sends you a text with a code and you put the code in, that's two-factor authentication because even if someone got your password, they still couldn't get access to your account because they need your phone to get that text. So it's very, very secure, and it's also backed up. So if the equipment that document is saved on breaks, there's a backup of it, and you don't have to worry about any of that because the provider takes care of it all. It's very easy to use, very simple. You've got access and availability, you can access it from anywhere. When you're answering this question, make sure you're relating this stuff to your workplace. We don't want to know the theory of this, we want to know how this technology has supported your business, how it's improved your business, what impact has it had on your business. So while we're going through lots of different examples, have a think about the technology you use, have a think about these implication benefits, and see how that would apply to your role in your organisation. Transforming personal and social communication and interaction. So how does the use of IT, how does the use of computer equipment, mobile phones, transform personal and social communication and interaction? So firstly, it makes organisations more accessible. You as a consumer, as a customer, can contact organisations a lot easier and a lot quicker. Think of the last time that you purchased something and you had an issue with it. How quick was it to get in contact with the organisation? You've got a number of different ways. Before you had to maybe phone them up or write a letter, but now you can go onto one of a number of different social media platforms. You go onto their Facebook account, you go onto their Instagram account, you can send them a direct message, and they have customer service people ready to respond to your inquiries. So they're more accessible than ever. You could even put a post on their Facebook page. Organisations don't like to see any negative comments on there, so if there is something that's negative, they're quite prompt in commenting how apologetic they are and what they're going to do to solve it. And the other side of that is when it comes to social media as well, is that they're very responsive to social media trends too. So if they provide a bad service and it affects a lot of customers. A lot of customers are going to go online, they're going to tweet, they're going to create Facebook posts criticising the company, and that company is going to take that on board and respond to that a lot quicker than before when you could only really write a letter. You couldn't get that information out there quick enough to a wide enough audience. It increases equality. Very easy for anyone to create a Facebook page or a Twitter account or whatever other social media account you want to create. So technology is quite cheap now. Even back to days of dial-up broadband, you now for not a lot of money each month can get access to unlimited broadband. The 4G or internet packages for phones are becoming very cheap as well for a large amount of data, and so everyone has now got access to the internet, and it's very easy for them to take these benefits of using these social media platforms to their advantage. Direct communication as well, so you can have direct communication with the organisation, direct communication with anyone who is using that software or have social media accounts. So you've got direct communication. It's the same for businesses having direct communication with clients as well, or to customers, and that allows you to avoid traditional communication routes. If we look at Donald Trump and his presidency, if we make a point on this, something that was commented on a lot was that he could get his message out very quickly to a wide number of his followers, of his fans, of his supporters, or his voters, and he could do that without having to deal with traditional media, so with newspapers or with TV or radio stations. So you've got that direct communication. You can avoid the traditional communication routes. Before, it might have been argued that certain messages would be blocked because certain media organisations have certain biases, but now that communication can get straight out to his followers, so you don't have to deal with any of that. It's benefits for businesses as well, and that they can save money on marketing. They don't have to pay for big marketing campaigns. It's quite straightforward to get a large number of followers, and then they'll see your messages directly as you put them out. And for individuals as well, you don't have to, when it comes to communicating, you can easily create Facebook groups to get people that are like-minded, to have some sort of communication directly with organisations. It's also cheaper. Once you pay the upfront costs, you can use it as much as you like. It's unlimited compared to the cost of expensive phone calls. Back when it was landlines, you had to pay per minute, or postage stamps and all these kind of things, or advertising campaigns. It's also a lot quicker, instantaneous, it's more personal, and there's a lot more options. So you've got a lot of different accounts. You've got Instagram, you've got Snapchat, you've got Facebook, TikTok, loads of different options for communicating. And that can be quite personal because you can video call, you can create voice messages, you can send pictures. There's lots of different things, lots of different multimedia that you can send. So what if collaborative technology is unproductive? So we've talked a bit about the benefits of it. I've talked about how it's quicker, it's more efficient, it's cheaper, it's more personal. But what if using this collaborative technology isn't actually as much as it's made out to be? What if it actually decreases productivity? And the point that's been made here is, if we have a look at some of these images, it's the idea that people get overwhelmed with notifications. You've probably found this yourself, where your phone buzzes and it's a notification and it's just nonsense. It's just something that's not relevant. It's probably something about an app that's just automated, that's just come out, and it's quite annoying seeing that. And if you're trying to produce some work of real value, where you really need to concentrate and focus on some work, and you keep getting these messages, these posts about, office holes that are good to know but not really urgent, not something you need to know right now while you're typing out something really important, then that can be very distracting, and it's difficult for people then to refocus on what it is they're thinking when they're getting all these notifications. Emails as well. Having emails come in constantly, the minute you get that notification, you have an urge to go and check it, and by the time you read it and you find out actually that's not something I need to know right now, it takes a while to focus on your task. There is perhaps some benefit on certain tasks, particularly for certain business processes, depending on your role in your industry, where it might be best to shut off some of this stuff, to get rid of the notifications, block out some time where you can really focus and get to grips, particularly with the more complicated aspects of your role. And the screen time there is just to illustrate the point, that without knowing, it's a great feature on Apple devices, where you can see how much time your screen's on over a week. And we can see here, person, friends who I got to screenshot this for me, was on TikTok for, I think that's almost 17 hours. And it just goes to show you how much time people are using and getting distracted by these notifications, so it can have an impact on productivity. What's the barriers to the adaptation of digital technology? So technology is brilliant if you can use it. Okay, it's absolutely brilliant, but sometimes there are barriers. So what are the barriers? And it's important to understand this when you're working to say, okay, technology is brilliant, but what is its limits, and what could we potentially do to ensure that we overcome any obstacles or barriers to using it? So what are the barriers? First one could be the lack of training. You could have software that does a lot of amazing things. It automates tasks, saves you time, and improves just your general working environment. But if you haven't been trained in how to use it, if it's new software and you've been said, right, there you are, crack on with it, just figure it out, mess about with it and see how you go on, you're never going to be able to make best advantage of all the features that's on there. So lack of training is a real barrier. And also, if you're not confident, we assume that everyone's confident using technology, but there are people who are a bit intimidated by it and wouldn't like to just start messing about in case they click the wrong button, makes them look a bit silly, or it affects something, it maybe deletes something accidentally. Some people don't really like to mess about and figure out for themselves, so lack of training would be a real barrier. You've also got buy-in. So this is about the confidence that people have in technology. So think about a new technology that's come out. If people don't buy into it, then they're never going to use it, they're never going to support it. They'll keep doing it the way they've always done it. So think about maybe an office where you've got people who have worked in there for decades, and they've always, the type of business is, maybe it's a small business where they've always done the same process on it as a paper-based process, and they put the files in a filing cabinet and they know what they're doing, and that's just the process as it's always been for decades. And then they've introduced a new technology. So rather than keeping all these customer records in a filing cabinet, it's going digital. You've got a database system. You can search up the customer name, find all the details about the customer, what they've ordered, when they ordered it, how much they owe, and all their information, any communication you've had with them. That would really improve that process. But if that person feels that that process, that change has been implied upon them, and they have that attitude of, well, it's always been that way, so what's the change for now? It's always worked, let's not change it. It's risky, might not work. I like it doing it this way, this is the way I've always done it, that attitude will mean that they will be less likely, and you'll probably find that they'll still, as much as they will probably have to use the software to a certain extent, you'll find them with their notebooks and their pens and paper and their files about their desk. And so that would prevent them from making best use of the technology. You've got communication as well. So if the change or the technology is not being well communicated to you, then you're not going to use it. You're not going to understand what it's for, what the benefits are of it, and so that would be a barrier. Actually, not even knowing that it's something you can do. I've been in organisations where there's been tools, digital tools, software on the computer that can really help, but people just didn't even know it was there, and they just never went to look for it because it hadn't been communicated out. We've got this new software, this new tool. An example of that was Microsoft Booking. So there was an organisation, and a lot of what they did was to book appointments with people, and it was a lot of, are you available this time? No, I'm not. When are you free? And a lot of, I'm not available. Can we change your appointment to next week? And then a lot of back and forth around, oh, I'm not available that time. Is this time suitable? And the organisation actually had a tool, Microsoft Bookings, which allowed you to set up a calendar. It automatically checked when you weren't free, and for the customer, they could then go onto this little online portal, very simple, and they could see what times you're free at, click it, and book an appointment. But nobody actually knew about it because it was never communicated out, and so everyone was wasting their time with all these emails back and forth arranging times. Barriers to technology. So we've got health and safety concerns. So if people have got concerns around health and safety, they're going to avoid using it. And that depends what the technology is, particularly around remote technology, mobile technology as well. Disabilities. So there's people can have disabilities which could impact their either their confidence or their physical ability to use technology. Now, that being said, there is a lot of tools out there which can be used to help minimise that effect, and that's perhaps something that's worth commenting on. If you go into your settings on your computer system, you'll find there's accessibility options, and on there you can change a lot of settings, particularly if there's someone that's got some disabilities, to make that computer suitable to them. So if someone is visually impaired, then in these settings you can get tools, or you can install software which can read out information that's on the screen, and in that way they can still use the computer. Or if they are if they can't hear well and their role involves audio, using audio software, or having to listen to things and type it up, then there's software there that can transcribe that into text which appears on the screen. Colour issues with sort of visual impairments around colour. You can change fonts, you can inverse the colours so it's darker, you have darker themes. There's a lot of technology on there that can help improve the situation for people who have disabilities, and that's something that's worth commenting on as well. And there's also a cost. So if the equipment is too expensive, the organisation is never going to implement it, and so cost can be a massive barrier. Costs are falling, but certain computer, particularly the software, is very expensive. Can be very expensive, and that could also be a barrier to adapting to an organisation, adapting technology. So think about if an organisation was going to implement some new technology, what would prevent it from happening? Think about the software that you use. Has there been any new software that's been put out there? Has there been any issues around using it, or even software that's been used for a long time? Has there been any changes or updates, or new people coming in? And what's been barriers? What's prevented them from making the best use of the software? Increasing accessibility to digital information. So for this one, think, what could you do to make information on your computer more accessible? So how is information more accessible on the computer? The very fact that information or files are on a computer makes them more accessible compared to if it was a bit of paper in a filing cabinet. That is because information can be accessed on multiple devices. Think about OneDrive or Google Drive. If you save a file on there, you can log into the app on your phone and you can access it on your phone. You could sign into the app on your tablet, you can access the files there. You could have another computer, you could have a desktop and a laptop, and you can access those files on both computers once you're logged in. So you can very quickly access these files across multiple devices. The information itself is also accessible. If you create a file, you put in 200 Word documents, and it's forms of applications, or it could be any forms, but let's just say they're applications, and you want to find an application which contains a specific keyword, a specific bit of information, you can actually select the search bar and it will search within the Word document, and it will return results which show all the files that have those sort of keywords within them. So you can search very quickly through a large pile of documents. If that was paper based, you'd have to read through them one by one. It'd take a very long time, and so that's more accessible because you can find that information a lot quicker. Information is also more portable. A large briefcase worth of documents can be stored on a mobile phone. Actually, a large warehouse full of paperwork could be stored on a phone, and if it's not stored on the phone, you can access it on the cloud, so it can be downloaded very quickly. So the internet's worth of information can be found or accessed using a tiny mobile phone that can fit in your pocket. So that makes the information more accessible as well. So there's key questions to think about when we're discussing accessibility to digital information. And one of the first considerations would be who has access to information. So what people, is it externally? Can people who aren't employees access information, or is it restricted employees? And if it is restricted employees, is it restricted to certain teams or certain individuals, or can anyone in the organisation access it? And that's going to tie into what is information and who actually needs to access it. And if there's not a need to access it, if it's confidential, then it's only going to be the people that actually are required to see that information, and there'll be settings set up so that only people with the right username and logins can access that. And how do those people actually go about accessing information? So that ties into your information management policy. Your information management policy, or your IT access policy, that outlines key things such as we've got them here. Can you access your work emails on a personal mobile phone? Some organisations allow it, some organisations say that's not allowed because of confidentiality. There is new tools out there now, such as Microsoft Intune, which means you've got bring your own device, BYOD, so that rather than being issued with a work phone and a personal phone, you can use your personal phone. And software like Microsoft Intune means that the work applications are sort of separate. They're in a separate part of your phone, and that way they're secure. You can't copy and paste things out of it or into it, so that your work information is secure, so you can use it on a personal device. But some organisations don't make the best use of that, and say it's simpler just to say work device, and you can only access it on a work device. If you don't need a mobile phone, you won't have one, and in that way you can only ever access it on your work computer. There'll be certain procedures around can you access your work systems on a personal laptop, or can it only be your work laptop, your work device? Is it possible to access your work systems out with your physical office? So if you don't have a laptop, you've only got a desktop, you don't have a mobile phone, you're not going to be able to access your work systems out with the actual office itself. If you've got a laptop, even then there can be rules about you've got to be connected. You've got to either have the physical Ethernet plug-in to your work network, or you've got to be connected to the Wi-Fi to access these work systems. And other organisations allow you to connect to what's called a virtual private network, so that's where you can access it from home or from a coffee shop or wherever else, and it's a direct link into your work network and it's secure. So that would allow you to access your work devices from your work laptop out with the office itself. So this is what it means by how do you access the information in your information management policy. This is a key question. If it is accessible, there's a lot of questions around when can I use it, what devices can I use it on, who can use it. And so when you're answering this question, relate this very strongly to what your organisation's policies are, and if you don't know them, look them up, ask them, contact your manager, contact your IT team, say what is that policy, how does it affect me, what are the rules, and that can help you answer your question. So yeah, you can access all this information because it's on a device, you can access multiple devices, but my organisation's rules are, I can use it on a work device and use it on a work mobile, but I can't use it on my personal mobile. Access privileges, so that's about who can access information. Not everyone can access all information on the system, so even think about your database system that you use. Say it's a CRM system, you can't look up every bit of information about every customer that your organisation deals with. You'll only be able to access the information for the accounts that you've been assigned, for the customers you've been assigned, and that's to keep the information private. Naming structures, that's how files are named. Usually if you've got a process that involves filling out documents, there'll be a certain naming structure that has to be applied. So maybe it's like the date and then the customer name and then a code or what it is. And that way when you store it in a folder, it's very easy to find the exact file you're looking for, and other people can find it as well. So if everyone had a different name and structure, it'd be very confusing to find the files that you need. External access, so that's where you can access it externally from your business. Talked about that with personal devices. And USB access, so that's another one. That's another thing that might be in your information management policy. Some IT departments can disable the use of using USB memory sticks or external hard drives with your work computer to prevent copying a large amount of files onto a USB drive and then taking them wherever and publishing them. Or if you're leaving, you're going to go work with a competitor, seeing a lot of information about customers. So when you go to your new job at a competitor, you can start contacting them to try and take away the business. So IT departments can disable USB access. So that's another thing that could be done. And you think about internal, external, and if it's external, that's going to be published on your website. It's going to be dealt with by your marketing team largely. Internals, all the database stuff, the files that we've been mentioning. The movement and transfer of information. So this question is probably the hardest question for this unit. So I'm going to spend a good bit of time explaining it and breaking it down. So let's break down this question. So this question is, describe a key technology enabled business process that you follow in your organisation. Describe how it's carried out and how the information flows. So a key technology enabled business process. So it's a business process. So that is a task where you follow the same steps in the same order each time. So for example, invoicing on the computer. Think about the business process that you do often. There's 3 sections to your answer. Just before I go on to that, I'm going to finish explaining that first point there. So key technology, so we've discussed business process. Key technology enabled, everything you do as part of your role is key. It's essential, it's your job, it's important. If it wasn't important, you wouldn't be doing it. So that's what key means. And technology enabled simply means it's on the computer. So it's basically a business process which you do on the computer. So don't get too bogged down with that jargon. So think about a business process which you do most often. There's going to be 3 sections to your answer. So the first part of your answer, first part of your evidence, if it's written, or even if it's verbal, if it's discussion, you're going to be looking at what happens before it comes to you. Think about that business process you do most often, and think about what happens before it comes to you. Who fills it out? What is the document? Where does it come from? How is it sent to you? Is a document or file emailed to you? Is it put in a shared drive? Is it just done on a database system? And how do you know then when to start the process, when to do your part of it? The second part is the process which you carry out. So you would then receive the document, the information, the file, and you then process it on the computer. You do something with it. You want to talk about what your process is and what the steps are that you do, and why it's explain why is it processed on the computer. And then 3, the next stages. So what happens once you've processed it? You're processing that for a reason. You don't just put that onto the system and it's never looked at again. There's a reason that information needs to be done in that way. So someone will need to look at it to do their job, to do the next stage. So who is it that looks at the information once you've processed it or after you've done it? Why do they look at it? What do they need that information for? So think about what happens, because this is about the movement of information through the stages. So you explain the information, comes from a customer, sent to me this way, I put it onto this system, and then once I've done that, my manager runs a report and looks at it, and you can see how that information changes and moves through the process on the computer. So let's use an example. So let's say customer makes a purchase. So this is going to be, I believe, invoicing again. Sales rep, so contact the sales rep, salesperson creates an invoice on the CRM system. The accounts assistant would then go onto the CRM system. They'd take out all of the invoices and they'd get it onto their accountancy software. So they'd then process that invoice onto their accountancy software. The credit control assistant then notices, runs a report and says actually that customer hasn't paid their invoice, and then they can contact the customer to chase up the late payment. And at the end of the month, the accounts supervisor creates a month-end report and reconciles the payments. So they make sure the payments add up, all the invoices add up, they've all been paid into the bank, and they can then add that final total onto their record of each month's revenue. So that is different people. So it starts with the customer making a purchase, salesperson creates invoice on the CRM system, the account assistant sees it on the CRM system, puts it in the accounts software, credit control person runs a report and sees that there's a payment missing, and payments then processed, sorted by the credit control. At the end of the month, the account supervisor runs a report, and that invoice is part of the report. It's one of the many invoices that would be summarised and totaled up to see how many invoices have been raised that month. So when you're doing this, think about the process you do and explain all three parts to it. And you want to include both a written answer and a flowchart outlining the information. So this is asking you to illustrate the information flow, so it'd be best if you could include a flowchart to explain how that information goes along the process. To create a flowchart, if you're doing it on Word, you'd select Insert, Smart Art, then click on Processes, and then you click on Basic Processes. You'll see the very same option to create a flowchart as I did there. Don't just state the business process, you want to clearly explain the transfer of data. So in this example, it will be from CRMs, emails, spreadsheets, whatever you're doing. You want to clearly explain the transfer of data comes from an email request from the customer. Sales rep types up into an invoice that's been put on the CRM system. The accounts person looks at the CRM system and report, takes it, imports it as a PDF into the accountancy software. Credit control runs reports a spreadsheet. You're talking about how that information changes and goes across different software applications. So it goes from one software application to the next. And how does this information share between people and tools? So how is it actually communicated or sent to the next person? Okay. So the next criteria on this unit is looking at the key components of the IT system. So I'm going to give you a bit of a rundown of the key components. The best way to do this is to visualize sitting at your desk, what's in front of you, and talking through the different bits of computer software that you use, the hardware, the software, and communication. When it says communication, that means network. So let's start. You've got your computer, you've got your monitor, so you can see information visually. You've got a desktop, or it can be a laptop. If it is a laptop, these two components obviously join together. Connected to your laptop or your desktop, you've got a mouse, you've got a keyboard, you could potentially have, you might not necessarily have all these things, a graphics tablet, speakers to hear things, projector to project on a large screen. So you've got these are typically called peripherals. These are things that are plugged into your computer. If we then have a look at what's inside your computer, this is an image of a motherboard. A motherboard is the key part of a computer where everything else is connected inside it. So it's the key bit where everything's all kind of connected together. Think of it of like a extension cord. Everything's kind of plugged into the middle bit, and that's where it's all connected. You've got a power supply unit, so that takes the electricity that comes out of the plug and it transforms it so it can go into this motherboard and power the computer. You've got a graphics chip, which takes the signals and it generates it into images which can be displayed on your screen. Without that, it'd just be black and white numbers. You could potentially have, and this is actually, new computers really won't have this anymore, a disk drive where you can put in CDs or DVDs. And you've got RAM, random access memory, so that allows that increases your sort of computing speed because it can quickly access the memory on there. And then you've got your hard drive. So your hard drive is probably a component you're probably most aware of if you're unfamiliar with what these are. Your hard drive is basically, it's like a USB memory stick. It's like a big USB memory stick, and that's where all your files are saved to if it's saved on your computer. On your hard drive is saved your operating system. Two main ones is Windows or Mac OS, so it depends on what your computer's got. And then you require the operating system, which is saved on your hard drive. You require that to run various software applications. So for example, we've got there Salesforce, the CRM system, Sage accountancy software, you've got Adobe Acrobat Reader, and you've got Chrome, a web browser, so lots of different applications, but if you didn't have your operating system, you wouldn't be able to run any of these applications. And then we've got the Microsoft Office package as well, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, database, and so on. So let's now look at communication. So connected into your motherboard via, usually it's an Ethernet cable, so that's usually a yellow cable. If you're at home, if you're looking at your home network, that's the cable that plugs into your internet router that allows you to get internet signals in a wired connection, so not your Wi-Fi in a wired connection. And in your workplace, that's connected to a server. A server is basically like, see your desktop there. It's basically your desktop turned on its side and stacked with a number of desktops on top of it. They don't have a monitor, they don't have a keyboard, and it's basically used for saving a lot of files, software onto, that can be accessed by different computers. So if your team has 10 people, 10 computers, you want people to have access to all the files. So you would just save it on your machine that only you can access. You'd save it on the server, which is basically a big stack of computers, so that it's connected to all the different computers, all 10 computers in your team, so that everyone in your team can access it. And the cloud is essentially that server, but it's in a different location, and you connect it over the internet, and it's owned by someone else, and you basically just rent space on it. Connected to your server is going to be any networked up devices. So a networked device is any device which is accessed through your network. And a lot of time in an office, it's going to be your printers, scanners, those sorts of things, because there's no point. Why buy 100 printers and 100 scanners for an office with 100 people when you could just buy the one, and all the computers can access it over the network. Okay, an internet router is connected to your server. If you're just at home, you'd be connected straight from your desktop to your router. And your router is a bit of hardware which changes the signals and allows you to connect to the internet. So that's the web. So you can connect to the internet through your router. So these are the different components of the IT system, giving you a wee bit of a description for each of them, and I've explained how they're all connected and how they'll relate. So you answer, make sure not just explain what they are, but talk about how they're related, and ensure you talk about hardware, you talk about software, and you talk about communications. Don't miss out on any one component. So we're now looking at how technology creates organisational success. So how does technology create organisational success? The use of specialist software creates success for a business. Success can mean different things for different organisations, and success will also be different for different people within the same organisation. So how does software help you achieve success? You want to make this very personal to you, so we will use an example, but remember, we want to make this very personal to you. Use it in the context of your work. Your answer should be in the context of your work and how the software which you use creates organisational success. But I'll use this wee example to illustrate what we're discussing here. So success for my business, this is an example, is providing outstanding customer service to encourage cross-selling, so that's selling different services to the same customer, and repeat business, so the customer's coming back over and over again. That is success because your business is getting more revenue. My organisation uses Salesforce, which is a CRM system, so it keeps track of all customer communication, all their records, their contact details, and what products and services they've ordered previously, to keep track of all the interaction with customers. So this would allow me to, as a wee space, you can put in all the benefits that would allow you to do. So it'd allow you to analyse what the customers bought previously. You can see that they haven't spent as much with you as they did in the past 6 months, so there's probably an opportunity there for them to spend that money with you again, so you'd want to go and contact them. Using this software would then allow me to create success for my business, because then you put the reasons why. Because if you can analyse and see that a customer spend is down compared to last year, you know that they probably need that same spend. They still need that product, that service this year. So you know to go and contact them, and that means you're efficiently using your time as a salesperson to go and contact customers that's most likely to need it, because you want to be seeing each of your customers increase their spend with you year on year. And that ultimately brings in more money, which is meeting your success criteria. So again, CRM system, tracks sales, interaction with customer journey, customer service satisfaction. We're looking at different software here now. So that was a sort of example in the structure. The key step to answering this question is to first of all define what success is for your organisation. It's going to be different. So first of all, say, what is success for your organisation? Okay, that is what success is. Right, what's the software that I use? And then you want to link the two bits together. How does that software, once you've explained what it is and what it does, how does that software create that success for you? So we look at different systems. So CRM systems, we've covered that already. Accountancy. So accountancy software allows businesses to plan and update budgets, control invoices, complete payroll efficiently and accurately, accrue financial statements. You can do management accountancy, which is basically budgeting, so you can work out what the budget is, and you can track to make sure your organisation is on track to meet its budget. Warehouse order management, so it can improve the efficiency of warehouses, including process, labour, space, materials orders, particularly space, because space is money, it's rent, so you can efficiently, you know what's selling, what's not selling, you know when demand increases, maybe at certain times of the year, so you know to get more of that product into your warehouse. And you can quickly and efficiently manage the people that are working there, and you can plan routes for people that are going around the warehouse picking up items to package and send out. their route can actually be efficient because it can combine a lot of different orders into an efficient sort of picking route. Project management software, so that would allow you to control, organise and control and organise a complicated project to ensure timescales, finances and quality are controlled, and it allows risks to be managed effectively. HR maintains compliance with employment law, can track annual leave, appraisal, sickness and absence. A lot of that's got to do with compliance. So, like I said, the 3 steps for this is think about the software you use. I went through a couple of examples here. Define what success is for your role, for your organisation. Define what the software is, explain what your software is and what you use it for, and explain how that software meets your definition of success. So, successfully introducing new software. So this criteria is looking for you to understand and to evaluate why, if you're introducing new software, what would increase its likelihood of success. Now this it's in a different outcome from the one we looked at previously. It was about barriers to new technology. So a lot of the time, a lot of the themes and ideas you've used for that statement can be used for this one as well. It's just kind of flipped the other way, essentially. So if something's a barrier to communication, what would you do to overcome that barrier? And that would be something you do to successfully introduce it. So what things would you do to successfully introduce new technology? Think about if your manager sat down and said, I've got a wee project for you to work on. We're going to change the main software that we work on. We're going to change our account software. We're going to change our CRM system. And I want you to take the lead in organising the rollout of the new software. What would you do? And what things would you watch out for? So you'd want to watch out for any technical barriers. So perhaps you have got an office full of old computers and the new software you've got only runs on the newest one, I believe the now is Windows 10. So let's say you've got an office full of Windows XPs and this software doesn't run on XP, it runs on Windows 10. Then that's going to be a technological barrier and you're going to have to upgrade all those computers in order for the new software to run. That can potentially throw up more problems because maybe you're using an old tool, depending on your industry, it might be an old tool or an old bit of software on the computer which doesn't run on Windows 10, and I've seen this happen in organisations where they've had to update because security updates and new software, but they work in a bit of a niche environment. They use a very specific tool and there is no updated version for Windows 10, so they're stuck in this hard place where a lot of staff don't really want to upgrade because they'll lose the functionality of this specific tool that they're using. Training as well, so people don't know how to use it, then it's not going to be successful, and you'd want to be thinking, is that provided or is that going to be something that's in-house? So is that something you're going to be provided with when you contact the supplier for the new software? Will they provide training? Will you have to do it in-house? Will you have to pay for it? Trial testing, so you probably, rather than just saying, right, tomorrow we're going to run it, you'd maybe select a few people to do a bit of a trial to see what works. Your business processes are probably going to have to be updated as well. If you think about an accountancy process, it might be that there's an extra box at a certain stage where you're inputting information, so you might have to update the form, the invoice form, to have that information so it's in the right place when you're processing it on the computer. Think about security as well when it comes to this very carefully. Is the software secure? Can people access it properly? Another barrier would be the feedback process. So how do you know it's successful if there's no feedback process? If you introduce a new technology and you don't ask anyone's opinion, was that successful? Is there any issues? You're not going to know. People might just not be telling you. So you want to have some sort of feedback process. So maybe a meeting a week after it's first introduced and then maybe a month after it's first introduced to review how successful is the implementation been, or is there further things which we need to do. That could be a meeting. It could also be a questionnaire, interviews, or a meeting. Getting buy-in, confidence. We spoke about this when we were discussing barriers to new technology. You want to have people to buy into it. You want to have people to have confidence. There's a difference between something being imposed upon someone and someone being involved in the process. So imagine if a director came into you, you've been using Sage Accountancy software for a year, really know how it works, you love it, you find it brilliant to work with, and they're saying, actually, in 2 weeks we're going to change over to Xero accountancy software. You probably would be happy because you feel that change has been imposed upon you. However, if that manager had a meeting with you and the rest of your team in the finance team and said, we're going to be changing softwares for whatever reason, and I'd like to have your input on what Sage does well, the current software, and what it doesn't do well. What additional features would you like to see in the new software? And that way that director could come back a couple of weeks later. It might very well still be the same software he was always planning, or he or she was always planning to roll out, but they can then say, well, look, this new software does all these things that you were asking for it to do, so this is a brilliant way to improve your work and your processes. Communication strategy, how it's actually communicated out, how that change is communicated to people. It's got to be communicated in the right way. People have got to be kept up to date. If people feel like they're missing out, they don't know, other people know more, and it's not up to date, then that's going to have implications for the successful introduction of that new software. And it should be compatible with existing systems. So if the new accounting software doesn't work with your CRM system, where all the new sales have been put through, that's not going to work. It's going to create a lot of additional work, having to manually take all that information out of the CRM system and put it into the sales system. So it could be about operating systems as well. Right, so this one is looking at a development in computer software. So a development, what it means by development is an update, upgrade, or new software. So it can be any of the three. It could be the same software, just get a bit of an update. It could be an actual upgrade, so the equipment or the software is completely changed, or it could be some brand new software that hasn't been used before. And I'll use some examples. So for this one, again, make it related to your role. Think about a development, a change, an update, an upgrade, a new phone, a new tablet. Maybe you didn't have tablets before. Maybe your CRM system changed, or one of the systems that you use at work has changed. Maybe you didn't use Microsoft Teams before, and now you're using Microsoft Teams, and so you're using emails less. Think about that change in development. So let's have a look at some examples. Some of the changes could be about going from operating systems. So it could be going from Windows XP to Windows 10. Could be going from Microsoft Excel 2007 to Microsoft Excel 2019, or now it's about a date, Microsoft 365. Going from Xero to Sage. Going from Skype to Teams, because Teams now has all the functionality of Skype for Business in it. It could be a mobile phone upgrade where you're getting new hardware as well, or it could just be system security updates. And you want to think about that and understand what that development is and what the impact of that change has had on your organisation using the tools and how it's been rolled out. So you could perform a SWOT analysis. That's a tool for evaluating this, and that could be very helpful. So SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and costs. It's where you have a look at what are the strengths of this change, what could be done well, the weaknesses, what could go wrong, what are the things that this software doesn't do as well that the old software used to do a lot better. Opportunities, what can this software do that the other software couldn't do? And the threats, what are the things that could go wrong, what are the issues or concerns that could derail the development or the upgrade. IT security risks. So what are the main risks to IT security? So we'll go through them. You could have inappropriate disclosure of personal information, misuse of images, data loss where data has been deleted, the hardware's been lost, you can't get that information anymore, unwanted or inappropriate content or access, cyberbullying, tasteless or unsuitable personal comments that's been put on maybe Teams or in a work chat, offensive or illegal content, worms, so that is like viruses. Denial service is a type of computer hacking attack. You've got hacking itself, where information has been stolen. Theft of the data, it's not been lost, it's actually been stolen physically. They've stolen the computer equipment, or they've hacked into the computer and they've stolen information that way. You could have accidental deletion or change, that could damage your computer equipment. Phishing, so this is where an email has been sent to you pretending to be from someone such as maybe your manager or a government body, maybe HMRC or something. They're asking for, or your bank, and it's basically fooling you into providing a hacker or criminal with personal information which they can take advantage of, usually for financial gain. Identity theft as well. So these are all risks, these are all things that could go wrong with using a computer. So these are the main risks to IT security, these are the main things that can go wrong, particularly viruses, data theft, data loss. So remember, it's data loss, data theft. Everyone sort of goes straight to data theft, like what happens if someone gets access, particularly with GDPR and data protection. But always think data loss as well. So there's two sides to this, and I'd want you to try and evidence both, ideally. So if that's what can go wrong with equipment, these are all the things that can go wrong, these are all the ways or things that people can use to steal, lose data. What can you do to prevent that from happening? So that would be the control measures. What can you do to prevent data from being lost or stolen? So there's things that are physical that you could do to prevent data from being stolen. So you've got CCTV systems, you've got access control, so that would be keypad key swipe access. You can have a siren procedure, motion lights, walls, fencing, fire suppression equipment. So fire, that's a physical threat to information, so fire suppression equipment that would prevent that threat from, or at least if it happened, it identified that it happened quickly. Surge protectors, so that is if there's an electrical surge, it won't fry the hardware, the computer equipment. Uninterruptible power supply, so that's a power supply that's got a battery or a generator, so if there's a power cut, the battery generator kicks in, the equipment still works. So that would prevent data loss. You know, if it's not been saved, the equipment's not going to go down and you can save it. Preventative digital, so these are things that can happen on the computer, control measures on the computer which can protect information. So strong passwords, two-factor authentication, mentioned that one already, like when you go to sign into Facebook, it sends you put your password in and it also sends you a code, you type your code in and then that way you can get in. So if someone's got your password, they still can't get access to your account. Antivirus, because that could identify, you might not know your computer's got a virus and it could be hacking information in the background. If you have antivirus, it will flag up the second that you've got it, or at least when it runs its search. File folder permissions, so this is where you set up access, so only certain people can access the folders. Firewalls, that block certain things from coming into the internet or from leaving your computer network and going onto the internet. Security updates, regularly any provider of any software, but if you take a look at operating systems, let's say Microsoft for Windows, they'll issue out security updates. So that's where hackers have identified that there's a loophole that they can take advantage of to hack access to information. So Microsoft will put out a software update to the computers to prevent that loophole from being able to be accessed by hackers. Encryption, so this is where you're basically coding information as it's being transferred across the internet or to different devices. So think of it as jumbling up all the text. So rather than being able to read an email, it's all jumbled up so you can't actually read it. You've got secure communication, so that's where communication's encrypted on both ends, end-to-end encryption. Think WhatsApp. WhatsApp's got that. Skype, and there's a few other messaging applications which have it, but it's not on by default. And so that's something to check as well. Is it end-to-end encrypted, or is it just encrypted when it's been transferred? Because if it's just encrypted when it's been transferred, that means that the provider, so if it was Skype and it wasn't encrypted, that means that Microsoft or Skype could actually see the communication on their servers. But if it's end-to-end encrypted, the only people who can see it is the person who sent it and the person who's received it. And RAID is basically where you've got 3 hard drives, 3 USB sticks, memory cards, and rather than saving it just on the one, because if you save it on the one it breaks, the information's gone, you save it across the 3. So if one goes, you've got access to it on the other 2. Corrective, so these are corrective control measures. So backups sent, all of these are just to do with backups. Most of the time you'll find that it's cloud based, so it's been saved to Google Drive, to SharePoint, OneDrive, so it's saved on the cloud. That way it's secure, it's backed up. If that server breaks, Microsoft or Google, they've got another server somewhere with a copy of it, so you'll never lose it. You can have these on site. Your business, your organisation might provide these, and that's maybe something to look into whether they do them. They're all basically variations of the same technique of, is it automatically updated? Is it sent off site? Is it physically each night put on a hard drive and taken to external location? So you want to find out how your organisation does backups, because that means it's corrective, because if you lost data, you could then go to your backup and you wouldn't lose that much information. You'd maybe just lose, the only information you lose is from the time the data of data loss and the time the last backup was made. So each of these factors will include a security procedure which you must follow. Don't expect all of it. All of it won't be relevant to your role. Find out what is relevant to your role and write about that. But there's some ideas of different control measures which are put into place to protect information on your computer systems. And it's not necessarily just on the computer, and it's not just necessarily corrective. It can be physical things too. Explain each of the risks in the previous question, so the previous criteria, and you could talk about what measures. So you could link that together with the previous criteria, and you should both evaluate control measures to both personal and computer threats as well. So that's what it says in the criteria. Improving security. So what information security policies and procedures should your company follow to improve security? So this criteria explain how organizations are using innovative systems and software to help improve security. So this is just about procedures and software that you're using that can help increase security. So these are some policies which you might want to include in your evidence. There's also some legislation there which you can look up. GDPR, I think everyone knows about that. That's something you're taught fairly early on when you start a business. The other ones you can have a look and do some research. You've got encryption. So these tools here are all different tools which you can use to encrypt information that you're using. So they're all tools. So you've got BitLocker, encryption keys, SSL certificate, and end-to-end encryption. So end-to-end encryption, we talked about WhatsApp. That means that only you and the person who receives it can see it, so encrypted. SSL certificate, these are certificates to ensure that the connection between, if you're looking up a website online, it's secure, and you'll see there's a wee padlock symbol usually on the address bar, and that shows that the SSL certificate's up to date and that the connection is secure. BitLocker is what's used for sending, is a tool that can be used for sending files across the internet, and you can encrypt the file itself, and then the other person have to have access to BitLocker and they can unencrypt it and access it. Software wise, encryption is probably a wee bit kind of complicated. If you're unfamiliar with it, if it's not relevant to your role, you can avoid it. If it is relevant to your role, you can discuss it. For software, most people should be able to have a look at that one. So that would be security updates. We already mentioned security updates and why they're important. Have an antivirus that can flag up viruses as soon as they're there, as soon as you run the search, and can remove them. You've got admin rights in a shared drive, so that is to ensure that you can set up access privileges, so only the right people can access that information, and there's maybe passwords on it. Passwords again, that is a good tool. Even individual files, you can set passwords on Word documents, and that can be a very useful tool for increasing security. Double two-factor authentication, talked about that a couple of times, and firewall as well, so that protects information or files from coming in to your computer network from the internet or from leaving it as well. Have a think about what your organisation does. Think about the software that you use and think about what implications that has for information security. How does using that software improve the security of your information? It says cyber security, just think security of your information. So thanks for listening to that, and hopefully this helps you when it comes to gathering evidence for the unit FR 1004, understanding the potential of IT.